You know that heavy feeling in your chest when you walk into a room and immediately scan the air to see what kind of day it will be? You know what it is like to replay conversations in your head, searching for the exact moment things shifted, wondering what you said wrong, what you did wrong, how you missed the sign. You have spent so much energy trying to be clearer, softer, more patient, more reasonable, hoping that if you just adjust yourself enough, the confusion will finally stop. But it never does. The confusion is not a byproduct of your mistakes. It is the environment you were living in. When you are caught in a dynamic like this, exhaustion becomes your baseline. You start doubting your memory, your instincts, your right to feel upset. You begin apologizing for asking simple questions. You carry a quiet shame that you cannot even name, because no one told you that love is not supposed to feel like a puzzle you are failing to solve. The truth is simple, even if it has taken you a long time to see it. You were not the problem. Your sensitivity was not a flaw. Your desire for consistency was not a demand. You were reacting to a system designed to keep you off balance. What you experienced was not a series of random misunderstandings. It was a pattern of emotional control, carefully maintained through uncertainty, shifting expectations, and subtle redirection. Understanding how this works does not erase the pain, but it does take the weight off your shoulders. It moves the blame away from your character and places it where it belongs, on the mechanics of manipulation. The core of this dynamic is not about love or hate. It is about control and the fear of losing it. When someone relies on emotional dominance to feel secure, they cannot afford consistency. Consistency gives you ground to stand on. It gives you reference points. It allows you to measure reality against what is being said. So, instead of stability, you get variation. You get warmth followed by coldness. You get praise followed by subtle dismissal. You get closeness followed by sudden distance. This is not accidental. It is a psychological rhythm that keeps your attention locked on her. Your brain is wired to seek patterns and resolution. When the pattern keeps changing, your nervous system stays active, trying to solve the mismatch. That is why you feel drained. You are running a mental marathon that has no finish line. The behavior shows up in small, almost invisible ways at first. A comment that sounds caring, but leaves you feeling slightly criticized. A promise that is made with certainty, but withdrawn without explanation. A disagreement that is reframed until you are defending yourself against something you never actually did. Each moment feels manageable on its own, but together they create a slow erosion of your confidence. You start to trust her version of events more than your own. You begin to monitor your tone, your timing, your expressions, hoping to avoid triggering the next shift. Over time, this constant self-editing becomes exhausting. You lose touch with what you actually think because you are too busy calculating what will keep the peace. Another part of this pattern is the reversal of responsibility. When things go wrong, the narrative does not stay neutral. It bends. You are told you are too sensitive, too rigid, too focused on the past, too dramatic about small details. The original issue fades, and a new issue takes its place. And suddenly, you are the one explaining yourself, proving your intentions, trying to show that you are reasonable. This is a common psychological defense used to avoid accountability. It is much easier to redirect attention than to sit with discomfort. It is much easier to make you the problem than to examine the behavior that created the tension. The impact on you is quiet but heavy. You start apologizing for your own boundaries. You start lowering your standards to avoid conflict. You begin to believe that your need for respect is actually a demand for perfection. You confuse compliance with peace. You mistake your silence for maturity. But silence is not maturity when it comes at the cost of your self-respect. The longer this continues, the more your internal compass gets distorted. You stop trusting your gut because your gut has been consistently invalidated. You start questioning whether you are actually the difficult one, whether you are missing something obvious, whether you are the source of the friction. This is exactly how the dynamic sustains itself. It does not need loud arguments to work. It only needs you to stay uncertain. There is also the slow narrowing of your world. It rarely happens all at once. It happens through subtle comments about your friends, gentle criticism of your family, quiet dismissals of your interests, or the creation of emergencies that always seem to require your presence at the exact moment you are making plans for yourself. You are not locked away in a literal sense, but you are gradually pulled into a narrower orbit. Your support system thins. Your time becomes consumed by managing the relationship. Your energy is redirected toward maintaining her comfort. This is another form of control, even when it is framed as devotion or closeness. The psychology behind it is straightforward. Dependency reduces the chance of outside perspective. When you are isolated, even slightly, there is no one to reflect reality back to you. There is no one to say what you are feeling makes sense. There is no one to remind you that healthy relationships do not require you to shrink. The impact is a quiet loneliness. You stay in the dynamic because leaving feels like admitting failure. You convince yourself that if you just try harder, you will finally earn the stability you were promised. But stability cannot be earned through exhaustion. It is either present or it is not. You need to hear this clearly, because your mind has been trained to look for your own faults. What happened to you was not a reflection of your worth. It was a reflection of a system that required your confusion to function. Your reactions were normal responses to an abnormal environment. You did not overthink because you are flawed. You overthought because you were given incomplete information. You did not become anxious because you are weak. You became anxious because your nervous system was responding to unpredictable stress. You did not lose yourself because you were careless. You lost yourself because you were asked to trade your truth for temporary peace. None of that makes you foolish. It makes you human. It makes you someone who believed that consistency and honesty were real, and who stayed long enough to find out they were not. Recognizing this is not about assigning blame to feel better. It is about removing the false guilt so you can finally see the situation clearly. Clarity does not come from analyzing her past actions until you find a reason that makes sense. Clarity comes from stepping back far enough to see the pattern instead of the individual moments. When you stop trying to decode the chaos loses its power. When you stop treating every mixed signal as a puzzle to solve, you free up your mental energy. When you stop asking why she does not act differently and start observing what she actually does, the picture becomes sharp. Awareness begins with a simple shift in focus. You stop watching for change and start watching for consistency. You stop measuring her words and start measuring her actions. You stop wondering if you can fix the dynamic and start asking whether the dynamic is fixable at all. This is not about becoming cold or indifferent. It is about becoming grounded. Grounded people do not argue with reality. They observe it. They name it. They adjust their position accordingly. When you step back emotionally, you create space between her behavior and your reaction. That space is where your power returns. In that space, you can see that you do not need to understand every motive to protect yourself. You do not need her admission of fault to validate your experience. You do not need closure from her to move forward. Closure is not something another person gives you. It is something you choose for yourself when you decide that the uncertainty is no longer an acceptable way to live. You begin to notice how often your energy drops after an interaction. You begin to notice how quickly you brace for criticism. You begin to notice how your body tenses before you even speak. These are not signs of weakness. They are signs of a nervous system that has been conditioned to expect threat. Recognizing them is the first step toward resetting that system. From awareness comes a quieter kind of strength. It does not look like confrontation. It does not look like dramatic exits or sharp comebacks. It looks like calm detachment. It looks like choosing not to engage in circular conversations that only drain you. It looks like responding instead of reacting. It looks like stating your boundary once, clearly, and letting the silence do the rest. You do not need to explain your boundary repeatedly. You do not need to defend it. You do not need to soften it to make it palatable. A boundary is not a negotiation. It is a statement of how you will participate or how you will step away. When you hold that line without anger, without guilt, without pleading, you remove the fuel that keeps the dynamic alive. Manipulation thrives on emotional engagement. It feeds on your need to be understood, your need to fix things, your need to prove your loyalty. When you stop offering that energy, the pattern has nowhere to land. This does not mean you become hostile. It means you become steady. You speak plainly. You keep your commitments to yourself first. You stop measuring your value by how much you can endure. You start measuring your peace by how much you are willing to protect. If contact is unavoidable, the approach shifts to practical clarity. You keep conversations brief, factual, and focused on what needs to be handled. You do not share personal updates that can be turned into leverage. You do not offer emotional explanations that can be dissected. You do not argue about the past because the past is being used as a weapon, not as a reference point. You stay present. You stay polite. You stay firm. You do not take the bait when you are pushed to defend your character. You do not chase validation from someone who has already shown they will not give it consistently. You treat the interaction like a transaction of necessary information, nothing more. This is not about punishment. It is about preservation. You are protecting your mental space. You are protecting your time. You are protecting your ability to rest without scanning for hidden meanings. Over time, this consistency becomes your new baseline. Your nervous system learns that it no longer needs to stay on high alert. Your thoughts stop circling back to old conversations. Your body stops bracing for the next shift. You start sleeping better. You start thinking clearly. You start remembering who you were before you learned to shrink yourself to fit into someone else's comfort zone. Healing does not arrive as a sudden breakthrough. It arrives as a series of small, quiet choices. It arrives when you choose to stop checking for messages that will only confuse you. It arrives when you choose to spend an evening without replaying what was said or unsaid. It arrives when you choose to trust your own memory again, without second-guessing it, to make room for someone else's narrative. It arrives when you realize that peace is not something you have to earn through endurance. It is something you claim through refusal. You refuse to participate in your own confusion. You refuse to trade your clarity for temporary relief. You refuse to keep showing up for a dynamic that only asks you to disappear. This is where real self-respect takes root. It is not loud. It does not need an audience. It is simply the quiet decision to stop abandoning yourself for the sake of keeping someone else comfortable. You will not regret choosing yourself. You might feel guilt at first, because guilt has been used as a leash. But guilt is not truth. Truth is that you deserve relationships where your feelings are not treated as inconveniences. Truth is that you deserve consistency, not as a reward, but as a baseline. Truth is that you are allowed to walk away from environments that require you to doubt your own mind. Moving forward does not mean you erase what happened. It means you stop letting it dictate your present. You carry the experience as information, not as identity. You learned how control operates. You learned how your own empathy can be used against you. You learned that kindness without boundaries is not kindness. It is exposure. These are hard lessons, but they are also protective ones. They give you a clearer filter for future connections. They help you recognize stability when it appears. They help you trust your instincts when something feels off, instead of dismissing it as your own flaw. You will notice that your energy returns in quiet ways. You will find yourself enjoying simple moments without scanning for hidden tension. You will feel a lightness in your chest that you forgot was possible. That lightness is not naivety. It is clarity. It is the result of finally stopping the mental labor of trying to make sense of nonsense. You are not leaving anything behind that was truly yours. You are leaving behind the weight of carrying someone else's inconsistencies. You are leaving behind the habit of apologizing for taking up space. You are leaving behind the belief that love requires confusion. The smart way to deal with this dynamic is not to outmaneuver it. It is to step out of it. You do not need to prove your point. You do not need to win the argument. You do not need to show her what she missed. You only need to protect your peace, rebuild your trust in yourself, and move forward with the quiet confidence of someone who finally understands how the game works and refuses to keep playing. Your life does not have to be a constant negotiation for basic respect. Your mind does not have to be a courtroom where you are always on trial. You can choose a different rhythm. You can choose stillness over scrambling. You can choose honesty over performance. You can choose yourself, not as a last resort, but as a first priority. When you do that, the noise fades. The confusion lifts. The exhaustion stops being your baseline. You are not broken. You were just caught in a system that relied on your doubt. Now that you see it, you can step out. You can breathe. You can rebuild. You can move forward, not with anger, but with clarity. And that clarity will guide you into a life where peace is normal, where respect is expected, and where you no longer have to earn the right to trust yourself.